Only 2% of people retire before they turn 50 years old, but today I'm on a mission to help one of my subscribers retire in their 30s, even though they only earn an average income. A little while ago, I sent out a survey to my email list and I asked people about their biggest financial goals and the current state of their finances. A few people responded, but the one that stood out to me the most was this couple in Florida who was trying to retire before they turned 40 years old. So let me show you what I would do to help this couple crush that milestone. And if you're new here, my name is Charles and I use this channel to document my own journey to financial freedom before I turned 30 years old. This is the first case study that I have ever done, and I hope you get a ton of value from it. And if you'd like to be a part of the next case study, there's a link in the description. And whenever I'm working with someone, I always want to start with what they're even trying to accomplish. Everyone wants different things in life, and it doesn't do anyone any good to give advice before you know what they're actually trying to achieve. And at a very high level, this couple wants to reach financial freedom before they both turn 40 years old. And they're both 32 years old right now, which means we've got 8 years to work with. I also asked them what they need my help with. And they said that they're trying to increase their savings rate. And this is really important. They're not asking about trying to increase their income, so I'm going to assume that their income is basically fixed. They just want to know how to save more money, which is something I love to hear. So with that in mind, what I want to do is go through their current situation and figure out when they're on track to be financially free, even if they didn't make any changes. Now, there's 3 things that we need to understand if we want to do that. And the first thing is their expenses. Second is their income. And third is their current savings. So all total, they said their current monthly expenses come around $5,000 per month. So that's going to be $60,000 per year. And remember that this is a couple, so this is 2 people. So that's not too bad. And I'll go into more detail on their expenses later, but the only thing that I want to point out right now is that about $3,000 per month of this, so $3,000 per month, so about 60% of their monthly expenses are all just on housing. So draw an arrow here, house, window, and door. I'm not much of an artist, but you'll bear with me. So again, about 60% of their monthly expenses are just on housing right now. So we're definitely going to come back to that. But that's a mortgage payment, not a rent payment, and that is a big difference. So we'll talk about their expenses more in a bit, but let's move on to their income right now. And talking about their income, from what I can tell, it seems like both of these people have pretty average jobs. So I think they each make about $60,000 per year times 2, so total annual income of $120,000. And just to note, that is after-tax income, not pre-tax income. Now, what I like about this is that since they make $120,000 after tax and they only spend $60,000 per year, they're making twice as much money as they need. So they can basically live just on one person's income every year. And that also means they get to save $5,000 per month. Oh my goodness, that is not a good 5. Let me fix that real quick. $5,000 per month. So this is how much extra money they're saving every single month because they're living on just about half of what they make. And this really goes to show that a dual income, no child household is pretty much a cheat code. Even though these 2 people only earn sort of average incomes, they're still able to have a 50% savings rate just because they can live on one person's income and save the other person's income. But lastly, let's talk about how much money they have already saved. And this couple has $120,000 in retirement accounts, another $60,000 in just a personal investment account, and then this one sort of surprised me. They had $50,000 cash. So these 2 are investments. This $50,000 here is just in cash. And the last thing is a little more complicated, but they also have another $180,000 in home equity. So I'm going to draw another house here. Give it a chimney this time. And a window. Gotta have a door. Not an artist, you get the idea. So this is a little more complicated because a house is not the same investment or the same sort of asset as, investments in the stock market. It doesn't grow at the same rate. Now, I should have asked some more questions about their current situation in housing, and when I work with people one-on-one, I definitely ask a lot more questions than I ask on this super short survey that I sent out to everybody. But since I don't have a lot of information to go off of, I had to make a couple of assumptions here. This couple lives in Sunrise, Florida, and in Sunrise, Florida, the average house sells for just about $375,000. And since they indicated they have a $3,000 per month mortgage, and since we know that they have $180,000 in home equity, we can kind of work backwards to make a pretty good estimate here. My best guess is they're about halfway through paying off a $360,000 house on a 15-year mortgage. And if that's the case, I figure they're probably going to pay off their house when they turn 40 years old, which is when they want to retire, which would make a lot of sense. But either way, all totaled, they have about $410,000 as two 32-year-olds, which is really not a bad net worth. So let me just underline that. Net worth. There we go. So now we know how much money they're spending, how much money they're saving every month, and how much money they already have saved. So what we can do is a quick calculation to figure out when they would reach financial freedom, even if they didn't make any changes. Now, I'm going to switch my marker for this. So the rule of thumb is that you need about 25 times your annual expenses in order to retire. So I'm going to write that here, 25x expenses. But what really matters is not... Did I really misspell that? Oh my gosh, that's so embarrassing. What really matters is not their current annual expenses, which right now, again, are $60,000 per year. This is not the number that matters. What actually matters is how much they're going to be spending after they have retired. And I'm assuming that they're not going to move or do anything drastic after they retire. But remember that I am expecting them to pay off their house, so with their house paid off, their expenses could really change after they've reached financial freedom, or at least when they turn 40 years old. And that's such a big deal because remember that housing right now is 60% of their annual expenses. They're paying $36,000 per year just on their house's mortgage payment. So once that house is paid off, their expenses are going to have a massive decrease, and they'll be able to retire on a whole lot less money than they would need if they were going to spend $60,000 per year every year in retirement. So I'll still assume there's going to be some expenses, there's going to be property taxes, there's going to be maintenance, all of that, but instead of $36,000 per year, they're probably only going to need about $6,000 per year. And their total annual expenses for everything else, which I'm assuming are going to be pretty unchanged once they retire, were just $2,000 per month, or $24,000 per year. So all total, after their house is paid off, their total annual expenses turn into $30,000 per year, which is a whole lot better than $60,000 per year up here, which is what they're currently spending. So their expenses, once their house is paid off, could drop by half. And that is a very, very big deal because instead of needing 25 times $60,000 per year, which, by the way, 25 times 60,000, that would mean they would need $1.5 million to retire. Instead of needing that, they actually just need 25 times 30,000. So doing that math real quick, times 30,000, now they only need $750K in order to be financially free, and that is a whole lot more doable. So I'm going to switch my marker one more time, and then we're going to do a little bit of math. So here's the situation. They had $120,000 in retirement accounts and $60,000 in an investment account, and they're adding $5,000 a month to that. If they earn a 7% return on investment, that turns into $944,370.53 after 8 years. So I've done that math right here. Now, I can't see the future, so I don't know if the stock market will actually return 7% per year between now and 8 years when they turn 40 years old. But it's a pretty reasonable estimate. And a lot of that money will be in retirement accounts, but it's still possible to get money out of retirement accounts if you retire early. But more on that at the end. And once their house is paid off, that $944,000 is more than enough to cover their annual expenses of $30,000 per year. they'd probably only need about $750,000 to be financially free. So already, they're actually on track to way overshoot their target. And not only will they on track to have about $940,000, they're also going to have a $360,000 house, which will hopefully also be increasing in value. So frankly, I think this couple is already very comfortably on track to be financially free when they turn 40 years old. But they asked me for help with saving more money, and I do think there's room for even more improvement. So let me show you the 4 changes that I would make to save thousands of more dollars per year and maybe even retire years faster. So the very first change that I'm going to recommend these people make is, number 1, start tracking their expenses. When this couple sent me information about their expenses, they said they were spending about $5,000 per month, which I think is probably accurate. But when I added up all of their individual expenses, which should have added up to $5,000, it actually only added up to $4,600. And that means there's about $400, which is unaccounted for. And that is every single month. That means there is $4,800 per year that this couple doesn't really know where it's going towards. And I should say that this was not the biggest discrepancy of some of the people who responded to this survey, but this is definitely worth tracking. That's not an insignificant amount of money. And if you don't know what you're spending that money on, there's a very good chance that it's being wasted. And some of this $4,800 might really be stuff that they actually do need, which they just forgot about. But there was a good chance that at least some of that isn't actually needed. So my best guess is, I'll say there's probably about $1,000 here, which I bet they could save if they really wanted to. And if you don't already track your expenses, I did put a budgeting spreadsheet in the description, which you can just download and start using for yourself. Because a lot of people have a lot more than $5,000 per year in untracked expenses, and it is totally worth keeping track of this. Let me switch my marker for change number 2. Alright, so change number 2 is going to be, drumroll please, pay off their car. And let me switch markers one more time. Now, I didn't get a lot of information here, but what they did tell me is that on their vehicle, which I'm going to try and draw right now, whoop, there we go, it's got 2 wheels, their vehicle is costing them $7,200 per year. And this was really the only expense that kind of jumped out to me as a really easy way to save money, because this is a lot higher than it needs to be. And without more detail, it's a little challenging for me to say exactly what they should do here, but there's sort of 2 different reasons I can think of why they might be paying this much money on their vehicle. And one option is they might have more than one car. This is very possible. A lot of people have multiple vehicles, but more vehicles means more money. So if you're trying to save more money, the first thing I would say is try to get this down to 1 car instead. This can save you a ton of money every year. And yeah, that might mean that you have to share rides or do some other things where it's not always super convenient. But if you can cut this expense in half, you're saving an extra $3,600 per year. And I'm even going to write that down because that's just such a big, juicy number. $3,600 per year in savings is definitely worth having a sort of inconvenient life just every now and then. But another option is that even if they only have 1 car, they might still be paying it off. Now, unless you do a ton of road trips, there is no reason you should be paying $7,200 per year just on gasoline, maintenance, and insurance. But if you're still paying off a car, then paying $7,200 per year actually makes a ton of sense, because those interest payments and, of course, the payments to actually buy the car in the first place are going to be a lot of money. So if that is the case and you're still paying off your car, then you want to pay off this car as fast as you possibly can. Now, in both of these examples, you can also trade in your car just to have a lower cost vehicle, and that's going to help you save money, really no matter what. But if you just need to pay off your car, and that's going to reduce this big, huge expense, then just do that. And I also know that this couple can definitely afford to pay off their vehicle, which brings us to change number 3. Switching markers here. number 3, and this is going to be to reduce cash. So as I mentioned earlier, this couple has $50,000 just in cash, which is about, for this couple, 10 months of living expenses. And since this couple is a dual income household, I really don't understand why you would need $50,000 in cash. Because even if one person loses their job, you can still just keep living off of the other person's income. So 10 months in cash reserve just seems a little excessive to me. Now, you don't want to bring this just down to zero, but you could probably take about $20,000 of this. And if you need to pay off your car, use that $20,000 to pay off your car. Or if your car is already paid off, you can take that $20,000 and just invest it in the stock market and start getting investment returns. Now, there are 3 options with this cash. So one, like we just talked about, if your car is not paid off, then just use this $20,000 and use that money to pay off your car. If this big cost here is coming from, payments on your vehicle, then you can massively reduce your expenses just by using this excess capital and lowering your costs on your vehicle. But if their car is paid off, then they can also take this $20,000 and apply it to their home, because we know that they're paying off a mortgage. But depending on when they bought their house, that might not be a good idea. I would probably only do that if their mortgage was relatively high, like over 5%. If it's over 5%, it's probably worth it, but if their mortgage is less than 5%, then I would really consider just taking that $20,000 and putting it in the stock market and starting to get investment returns. $20,000 turns into $35,000 after 8 years of a 7% return. And change number 4 really isn't the most important, but if you really want to find some more savings, you could probably save more money by reducing entertainment costs. This couple said they were spending $150 per month on entertainment, and that turns in to $1,800 per year. $1,800 per year is not their biggest expense, and maybe it's not a huge deal, but $150 per month still seems like a fair amount for something like entertainment. And even with a few subscriptions, I think you could probably keep their expenses a lot lower than that. And some people might take this out of context. You do not have to just sit at home and play cards just to save money. It's totally worth it to live life and have a little entertainment, especially when it's not the biggest expense in the world. But just try to see what it's like to live on $100 per month instead of $150. And if that's easy, then try to live on $75 per month. You can make this little fun challenge for yourself, but it doesn't have to be a big deal. And if this feels like a huge thing, then you really don't need to worry about it. This change number 4 is really not as important as these other 3 changes, but hey, an extra $1,000 is an extra $1,000. And these people asked me to help them save more money. So this is one option. But other than that, this couple is actually doing pretty good. And other than their housing expenses, their expenses are actually pretty low. And housing is obviously really expensive right now at about 60% of their total annual expenses, but since that's all a mortgage, I don't want to make any changes here. That could be a really good investment, especially if they plan to live in Sunrise, Florida for a very long time. And as I mentioned earlier, this couple, without making any changes, is already saving 50% of their income, which is way more than most people. And that's why they're on track to retire at about 40 years old, even with average incomes, which is way faster than the vast majority of people. So this couple is doing a lot of things right. But if they did make these 4 changes, let's see what difference it would make. So I really do believe that tracking their expenses could probably save them an extra $1,000 per month. So I'll put that here. And I really do believe that if they really wanted to, they could cut their transportation expenses in half. So I'll say they'll save another $3,500 here. And plus, they're maybe going to save an extra $500 per year just by reducing their entertainment costs by a little bit. And plus, they're going to get more of their cash invested, which means they're going to take this $20,000, which they already have, and get it in the stock market or towards something else to save them more and more money. So with changes 1, 2, and 4, we're already talking about saving an extra $5,000 per year. Which is not bad. There's a lot of people who don't even save $5,000 in a year. And we're talking about just saving an extra $5,000 per year on top of the $60,000 that this couple already saves. And when you add in that extra $20,000 invested, that means that in 8 years, this couple could have $1,031,701.35, assuming they earned a 7% return on their money. And what's even better is that after they pay off their house, by saving this extra $5,000 per year, their expenses won't just be $30,000 per year. They're actually going to be $25,000 per year. So, one more zero there. So using the rule of thumb, this couple only needs to multiply this number by 25, which means they need $625,000 in order to be financially free. And remember, they're on track to have $1 million. This number is a lot bigger than that number, which means this couple should be very comfortably financially free as long as the stock market doesn't do something absolutely crazy. And also remember that this number doesn't even include their house, which will hopefully be worth hundreds of thousands of dollars and hopefully getting even more valuable. So I think this couple is an absolutely great example of how regular people can still retire early. They earn regular incomes, they spend sort of a regular amount of money, and as far as I can tell, they're not doing anything special. But they're still on track to retire before they turn 40 years old. And if they really wanted to, they could probably retire even before that. Now, there is just one more big thing which we haven't addressed yet. But before I get into that, I just want to say that if you enjoy videos like this, please let me know in the comments. This is the stuff that I love doing. Helping people reach financial freedom is sort of the whole point of this entire channel, and I love working one-on-one with people when I have time. So if you get value from these real-world case studies, let me know in the comments and I'll make more of them. But I said that there's one big thing which we haven't addressed yet, and that big thing is that a ton of this couple's finances are all going to be wrapped up in retirement accounts. But that doesn't have to be a big issue. And to see why that does not have to be a big issue, you just need to watch this video right here, where I explain how to get early access to your retirement account money without paying big penalties.